Okay, so in this section, we are going to talk about the nuclei of the brain and the white matter inside the brain as well. Free colloquium is probably the most important part because it's the structures that you can show and you have to tell the teacher. The best thing to do, well, it's going to be hard to understand it, but with the right pictures, you'll be able to visualize what's going on. So we already spoke about the lateral the ventricles and how they look like. So this is the ventricles. Yeah. Now what you have to understand is just sitting under the ventricles, you'll find the caudate nucleus. So it actually runs along with the lateral ventricle, and then it's connected to the putamen. But what I want you to understand is that it is running along with the lateral ventricle. And I'm describing this to you because when I show you cross sections of the brain, I'll show you how you can use this information to your advantage. Another thing is the third ventricle. How does it exactly look? So this is the third ventricle. This is a sagittal section. So sagittal section is, you know, where the sagittal suture is in the skull. That's basically the same direction. So here is the corpus callosum. Underneath the corpus callosum is, what do you find? The fornix. Okay, so the fornix, you're like, what's this? This picture here shows you the corpus callosum, and the fornix is closely related to the corpus callosum. Okay, the mammillary bodies, the fornix. This is part of the limbic system. We'll talk about this later, but what I want you to understand is corpus callosum, underneath that is the fornix, and then underneath that is what? The third ventricle. You can understand that the corpus callosum is very narrow, it's just in between the two hemispheres. It's there, so it can suggest how narrow the third ventricle is as well. The third ventricle is not that big. So this is the third ventricle. This blue area is the outline of the third ventricle, and then obviously here's the cerebral aqueduct connecting it to the fourth ventricle. But what I do want you to take note of is this part here. It's called the interthalamic adhesion. So what does that mean? It's where the thalamus are going to be connected. Okay. And what does that tell you? That means the thalamus is quite close to the third ventricle, and that's going to help you. So what we're going to do is now look at cross sections. So in your, I don't know, your BRS neuroanatomy book, there's that part where you see cross sections. Okay, this cross section is nice. You may think it's not, but okay, this is a cross section I'd like to begin with. The reason why is because you know some stuff. Okay, so do you remember I said that the insula is here? Yeah, let's read the text underneath here. It says that it's a coronal section cut through the anterior commissure, amygdala, septal nuclei, and optic chiasm. Okay, I mentioned a few things here. Main thing is what? Where's the anterior commissure? It's over here. Where's the optic chiasm? Over here. This cut is basically through here. Yeah. So if I put it on the brain here, am I going to see the insula in this cross section? And the answer is yes. Okay. So this is the cross section. I'm going to show you a better picture actually. If I can find it. Oh yes. So in this cross section, it's the same because this is the level of the anterior commissure. So here is that cross section. Okay, so I'm going to draw it for you actually because drawing makes it seem easier. So we have the brain like so, but realize, look what I'm going to do. I'm going to go like this, like that. Yeah. And you're thinking, why am I doing this? Do you remember? So this is where the lateral sulcus is here. What is this part here? Do you remember what's covering the insula? The operculum. So these are the operculums that are covering the insula. So here, operculum covering the insula. Insula is grey matter. Okay, so here is the insula. Now, the best way to learn this cross section is a method where you start from. You can start from the inside or outside actually. Usually start from the inside. Now, this lateral ventricles, what did I say? Is running just below or lateral inferior to the, which book was it? This book. There you go. So here's the ventricle, just on the lateral and inferior lateral aspect of it, you see the caudate nucleus. So the first thing for you to do when you're viewing these cross sections is actually finding what ventricle you're seeing. Okay, so this is the lateral ventricle. As soon as you notice the lateral ventricle, what is the grey matter that's going to be directly under it and lateral to it? Exactly, it's going to be the caudate. Number 2, head of caudate nucleus. I don't know if you can see, but number 2 is head of caudate nucleus. So here we're going to have the caudate nucleus, yeah, which is going to be the grey matter. Okay, now what's going to happen is that you're going to have a system where it's going to be grey, white, grey, white, grey. Yeah? So what do I mean by this? This is the grey matter. Then you're going to have a white matter in between. Okay, I'm going to draw white matter with red because that way you can actually see it. So this is the white matter here. Yeah. So grey matter is caudate nucleus. The white matter is going to be the internal capsule. Then you can have grey matter. This section, it looks like a lens. That's why it's called lentiform. Lentiform nucleus. Yeah. But the thing is, the lentiform is actually broken up into 2 parts. That's the thing, and that's the putamen and the globus pallidus. Yeah. But just think of it as one thing. So this is the lentiform. If you want to know where is the globus pallidus, it's this medial part here. So let me draw it over here because I just totally killed that one. Okay. Globus pallidus is here, medial. Globus pallidus is here, and this part here is the putamen. Yeah. Anyways, going back to what I was saying about the little sequence of events is you have grey, white, grey, and then white. This white matter is going to be called the external. This was the internal, and this is the external. And then after this white matter, you can have another grey matter, which is called the claustrum. Yeah. So we started off with what? The caudate nucleus. In between that, we had the white matter, internal capsule. And then you have the lentiform, and then you have another grey matter, external. Oh, you can't even see this. Sorry. Caudate nucleus, internal capsule, lentiform, and then you have the external capsule. And then you have the claustrum, and then you have the extreme capsule. Okay, so this is called the extreme capsule. So it's the most outer capsule. And then finally, so where's that extreme capsule? It's here. Yeah. And then finally, you have the grey matter, which is called the insula. So again, find your bearings. Okay, what is the first thing you're going to do? You're going to find the ventricles. Depending on what ventricle it is, you know what the grey matter is. Okay, so if you see lateral ventricles, you know it's going to be the caudate nucleus that's just beneath it. And then from here, the white matter that's next to that is the internal capsule. And then if you see a lens shape, it's going to be the lentiform nucleus, which is basically the putamen. I should draw it the other way around actually, because there's the globus pallidus first, because it's the more medial side. So globus pallidus and then putamen. And then the external capsule is white matter, claustrum, extreme capsule, and then the insula. Okay. Now, if I was to ask you, okay, so if I do another cross section where you would find the third ventricle, let me use this one. Okay, that's a bit obvious, but yeah, well, the thalamus you already know looks like this, right? But can you see it's on either side of the third ventricle? This is the third ventricle, and you say that it's the thalamus. Here in this case as well, third ventricle is here, thalamus is here. Yeah. See, the caudate nucleus, you're thinking, wait a minute, this is the lateral ventricle. Where's the caudate nucleus? Remember what I said? It's the lateral and just inferior to the lateral side of the lateral ventricles. Okay. And remember I said the interthalamic adhesion? That's what this part is. Yeah. So the thalamus are literally on the sides of the third ventricle. This is how you can find your bearings when it comes to the cross sections of the brain. Okay, so the next cross section that we're going to see is at the level of the interthalamic adhesion. So if you want to see it in this view, before we saw the optic chiasm to anterior commissure, this one's a bit more posterior. This is the interthalamic adhesion, and you can say that it's about central sulcus, almost just anterior to it. So if you look on this side, the central sulcus is there, but anterior to it, and the lateral sulcus is over here. So can we see the insula? Yeah, we'll be able to see the insula because it's buried within that lateral sulcus. So we look at this cross section, and again, here's the insula. You can see it says with the arrow 18, no, 12 insula. Okay, so the reason why I'm telling you or bringing up this cross section is because I spoke about how we had the caudate nucleus, the internal capsule, lentiform, external capsule, claustrum, extreme capsule, and the insula. But in this cross section, because it's more posterior, the shape of the caudate nucleus, because I hope you remember the caudate nucleus looks how it looks. Let me find a picture of it over here. So this is the caudate nucleus. So when you cut over here, it was more inferior, but as you go posterior, it starts to increase in height. So it starts to go more higher. So as you can see, and also the thalamus wasn't there yet, because here, this is where the third ventricle is, this is where the thalamus is, this is anterior to the thalamus. So now this posterior cross section, you're gonna be able to see the thalamus. So why am I bringing this up? This was at the level of the optic chiasm, and this one's going to be the interthalamic adhesion. If I draw the same picture, it'll look slightly different. We can have again the lateral ventricles, and then we're going to be able to see the third ventricle. Yeah? So this is the third ventricle. And then we will be seeing the thalamus here. So here is where the caudate nucleus is going to be found. So now, the point I'm trying to make is you have the thalamus as the green matter in the medial side, and then again the same kind of structures, internal capsule, lentiform, with the external capsule. And colostrum, extreme capsule, and then insula. Yeah. So in this cross section, more posteriorly, the medial grey matter isn't the caudate nucleus, it's going to be the thalamus. And that's just basically the anatomy of the brain. So let me explain to you the cross section. Because if you look at the cross section, which book was it? This one? Yeah. So this was the sagittal section of the brain. So when we cut it, the reason why I'm showing you this is because I want you to be able to realize the midline of the brain. So if you see this is the corpus callosum, just underneath that is going to be this structure here, which is called the septum pellucida, and then you have the fornix over here, and then the third ventricle. So what am I saying? You have the firstly corpus callosum, then you have the septum pellucidum, then the fornix, and then third ventricle. Okay, so this is the midline. So when I say midline, it's right in the middle. So if you look at this picture here, again, you're going to understand what I'm saying. So here, you're going to have the... No, this picture's not good. You can even look at this. Let's look at this. So here, this is the connection between the two hemispheres, like here. So this corpus callosum, and then what is this structure? The septum pellucidum. This, because it says septum, so just like how the heart is got a septum in between the two ventricles, the septum divides what? Divides the lateral ventricles. Yeah, the septum pellucidum divides the lateral ventricles. So when you see the lateral ventricles, the structure in between it is the septum pellucidum. And we can take a look at this picture here. Lateral ventricles, septum pellucidum. And then right underneath the septum pellucidum, what would you find? Taking a look at this, the fornix. And taking a look at this, fornix. And then just underneath the fornix is what? The third ventricle. So I told you the anatomy from medial to lateral, and now you can also know the anatomy down the midline. So the midline, it goes corpus callosum, septum pellucidum, which is the septum of the lateral ventricle. So it's the thing that divides the two ventricles. The fornix, and then finally the third ventricle. And then, as you can see, on the other side of the ventricle, third ventricle, is a thalamus. Underneath the third ventricle here, surrounding it, is a hypothalamus. Yeah? So the hypothalamus is like the grey matter, the bed of the third ventricle almost. It's at the bottom of it. So if I was to draw you the third ventricle, let me show you a picture of the third ventricle. So here's a picture of the third ventricle. So where would you say the hypothalamus is? The bed. So this part here. So the mammillary body is part of the hypothalamus. Yeah. Infundibulum is also. Tubus cinereum. Yeah. So these structures here that are surrounding the inferior aspect of the third ventricle, this grey matter here is part of the hypothalamus. Okay, so we've spoken about the individual nuclei of the inside the brain. So we looked at this one, the cross section through the optic chiasm or the anterior commissurer. You can see the caudate nucleus and the lentiform, or you can say the caudate nucleus, globus pallidus, and putamen. These three structures make something called the basal ganglia, or basal nuclei. So here is how these three structures are called the basal nuclei, but they can be categorized differently, so organized differently. So how does it look? This here is the lentiform. So the globus pallidus and the putamen is called the lentiform. Or you can look at it as the caudate and the putamen, because they have these striae that connect the two. So these are called the striatum. So these two are called the striatum. And then altogether they're called the basal ganglia, or you could call them the corpus striatum. So the main divisions that you need to know is that this is the lentiform, and then the caudate and the putamen, the outside aspect, is the striatum. And the whole thing is called basal ganglia or corpus striatum. So striatum is this, this and this. Corpus striatum is all three. Okay. Now another thing that you need to know is the limb, internal capsule. The limbs of the internal capsule. Okay, so this section is a transverse or horizontal section. There's horizontal section there. So it's cut horizontally. We can see the structures that we were talking about before, how we had the thalamus, internal capsule, lentiform, and the external capsule. Claustrum is here, extreme capsule, and then the insula. You see that same sort of arrangement. Yeah? And again, the caudate is the head of the caudate because it comes out like this. Yeah. Ventricle, the third one. Yeah. Interthalamic adhesion. So anyways, the point that I'm bringing up is the internal capsule has three parts: the anterior limb, the genu, and the posterior limb. The thing is, what is the internal capsule? Is white matter. Therefore, it's going to be the fibers or the axons running from of the neuron. Now they can be running in different ways. So for instance, I can tell you, okay, so we are doing, for instance, the motor cortex, right? So it starts from whichever part you want to move. So let's just say here, and it goes through the internal capsule. So which part of the internal capsule would it go through? And the answer to that is the posterior limb. What it is that most of the fibers go through the posterior limb. Yeah. So if you have sensory fibers, so they go through the posterior limb. Cortical spinal, which is motor fibers, they go through the limb, posterior limb. Optic. So if you have any like visual, the visual pathway goes through that as well, and even the acoustic pathway. So basically, you can think that the posterior limb holds pretty much most of the fibers that run from the cortex through this posterior limb. The genu, on the other hand, what runs through the genu? The genu, so this part, it's called genu because it's the, if you think of it, this is the anterior, this is the posterior, and this is the knee. Genu means knee, so it's the knee of this internal capsule. And what goes through it is the corticobulbar tract. Corticobulbar tract means so what does it mean? Cortical, so from the cortex, and bulbar is going to be the brainstem. Yeah. So the question that the teacher could ask you is, instead of him asking you, okay, where is the genu of the internal capsule, he could be a bit more smarter and be like, okay, show me where the corticobulbar tract runs through. So basically, he's asking you where there's cortical bulbar tract run through, and that's the genu of the internal capsule, and then show me the genu of the internal capsule. So this part here, he will show you a horizontal section. Yeah?